Hi everyone, welcome back to another Algebra 2 video. Mr. Beseda here. And we've only got one preview video for our next lesson covering domain and range. And this one hopefully is a pretty quick one. So our objective today is to find the domain and range of a function given a graph or table. Now, the word domain is something you've definitely heard before. And we don't often start with a picture here, but this time we're going to start with this nice image of a tiger. And we're going to think about, well, what is the tiger's domain? And if you think about that, when you're asked that question, it really means, well, where is the tiger allowed to go? And this particular tiger is kind of stuck inside his enclosure. His domain is everywhere that he's allowed to go, but his domain doesn't include everything. And that's the idea we're going to keep when we talk about functions. When we talk about domain and range, we're going to talk about where is a function allowed to go and where is it allowed to be. So that being said, let's take a look at our first example. But before we do that, we should define what the domain and range are. Now, the domain is defined as the set of input values of a relation, and the range is defined as the set of output values of a relation. Inputs we think about as x values, and outputs we think about as y values. Now, what I've got on this graph shown is just a set of 4 points. And if we wanted to find the domain, we would just say, okay, well, what are the x values where those points are? And if I wanted the range, I would say, what are the y values where those points are? Now, sometimes people can see this right off the bat, but I usually recommend when I see a graph like this to list out the ordered pairs in a table first. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to set up myself an XY table, and then I'm just going to go 1 point at a time and write down those coordinates. So I'll start with this one all the way on the left. It appears if I count boxes, that first ordered pair is at -3, 4. And I'm going to put that in my table. Okay, and I'll do that with all the points. The next point over here appears to be -2, 3. The third one is at -1, 2. And finally, this only one in the first quadrant appears to be at the ordered pair 1, 2. Once I've got that table, and again, all I've done there is written the coordinates of each point, I can construct my domain and range pretty easily just by listing the x and y values. So the domain, which is the x values, would be written -3, -2, -1, and 1. And the range is the set of y values. So that would be 4, 3, and 2. Okay, now one thing to note here, I did not write the y value of 2 twice, because when I'm writing a domain or a range, I do not need to repeat anything. So I should not write that 2 twice. And in addition, the numbers don't need to go in order. So I could write that range as 2, 3, 4, or 4, 3, 2. Both of those things are fine. Let's look at another example. Also consisting of a set of points. And again, if I'm thinking about where these points live, then the main idea that I want to keep is just, well, where do those points lie? What are their locations? So I'm going to start again by setting myself up an XY table and listing the coordinates of each point. I'll start in the first quadrant here. That first point appears to be at 3, 4. We've got a point here at 1, 1. This guy is down at 2, -2. We've got a point at -3, 2. And our point down here in quadrant 3 is actually -3, -3. Okay. Now, once I've got that, I'll go ahead and write those into my table. And now for a question like this, you really don't need to go into the table once you get used to doing these, but at the beginning I like to show the table just to remind myself of where I'm getting my numbers from. So those are my x and y values, and now I'll write my domain and range. So domain, I start with -3. Remember, domain, those are my x's. So I've got -3. I'm not going to write -3 twice, so the next one would be 3, 1, and 2. And over there on the range side, remember range is your y values, we will have 2, -3, 4, 1, and -2. And that is my domain and range for the graph shown. That's how we handle it when we have points on a graph. We'll take a look at a couple more quick examples to finish up here. You could be asked for the domain and range given a set of ordered pairs. And for me, that's actually a little easier because you already have the points. You don't have to look at the graph and find them. Now, if I remember that ordered pairs always go x and y, I don't actually need to make a table. I can just look at those xy values to make the domain and range. So if I'm doing that, then the x's are 1, 2, 4, and 5. And my y values are just 4, 5, 7, and 8. And that's all we need to do to find the domain and range from those sets, from that set of points. Okay, we'll finish with one last one. Sometimes we'll give you a table directly, and for me I think that's the easiest thing. As long as you can remember that domain is the x values and range is the y values, you're pretty much there. So for this final example, my domain would be the set 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Let's try to write that curly bracket a little neater. And these are essential. This is part of your answer, so make sure you get those curly brackets on there. And for the range, not a lot of values here. I'm going to start with the 1, the 2, and the 3, and I actually don't need to write either the 1 or the 2 again, because again, I don't repeat